The cashier's hand clamped around my wrist so suddenly I almost dropped the velvet box I had just purchased. For a 70-year-old man like me, surprises often come in the form of small health scares, or the occasional letter from the pension office, not in the form of a young stranger grabbing me in a jewelry store. My first reaction was irritation, the old steelworker in me wanting to bark. "What the hell are you doing?" When I saw his eyes, wide and brimming with terror, my irritation was swallowed whole by confusion. "Don't go to the party under any circumstances," he whispered. His voice trembled, breaking like a weak plank under too much weight. I froze. For a moment, I thought he had mistaken me for someone else. Maybe he was confusing me with another old man buying something shiny for his family. But his grip only tightened, desperate, almost painful. I smelled the faint mix of sweat and cheap cologne rolling off him. He was deadly serious. "What did you just say?" I asked, my throat dry, my voice more fragile than I liked. The cashier leaned closer, so close I could see the pores on his face and the fear swimming in his pupils. His breath was hot against my ear. "If you value your life, old man, don't go to that party tonight." "I'm not kidding. Don't." He let go just as abruptly as he had grabbed me. The velvet box slipped in my hand, nearly tumbling to the floor, but I caught it. His hands retreated to the counter, trembling as he pretended to tidy a stack of receipts. Not another word came from him. For several seconds, I stood there, staring. My heart pounded like the hammer presses at the steel mill where I had worked 4 decades of my life. I wanted to demand answers, but something in his expression warned me against it. His lips pressed into a hard line. His eyes wouldn't meet mine anymore. He looked like a man who had already said too much. Finally, I shook my head, cleared my throat, and walked out. The September evening air was cool, crisp with a faint promise of autumn. The streets of downtown Cleveland buzzed faintly with the hum of cars and the distant laughter of young people spilling out of coffee shops. In my hand was the little velvet box, the one I had saved up for on my modest pension. Inside lay a bespoke bracelet I'd commissioned for my daughter-in-law, Juliana. Silver links, her initials engraved, and the words she was always repeating on social media, "Live boldly." It wasn't cheap. In fact, it stung to buy it. But I had convinced myself it might help mend what had been broken. Juliana never liked me, not from the first day Andrew brought her home. She thought I was too old-fashioned, too blunt, too much of a relic from another era. She wanted sleek dinners, fancy wine, Instagram-worthy vacations. I wanted backyard barbecues, Sunday church, and football on TV. But she was my son's wife, the mother of my grandkids, and the woman who now seemed to have Andrew entirely under her thumb. If this bracelet could soften her heart even slightly, then maybe, just maybe, there would be peace again in our family. That was the thought that carried me as I walked across the parking lot toward my truck. But then his words came back, like a dark echo scratching at my ears. "Don't go to the party under any circumstances." I paused before opening my door, my eyes narrowing. What could he possibly mean? A threat? A prank? Some confused lunatic projecting his troubles onto me? I was 70 years old, too old for superstitions, too old for games. But the look in his eyes hadn't been a game. That was real fear. I slid into the driver's seat, the bracelet resting on the passenger side, and started the engine. The hum of the old truck gave me comfort, a familiar sound from a machine I had babied and repaired more times than I could count. As I pulled out onto the road, the city lights smeared in the rearview mirror, I thought of Andrew, my only son. My reason for everything. I thought of how far we had drifted. He used to come to me for everything. Advice, help with his homework, even tips on how to talk to girls back in high school. But somewhere along the line, after college, after meeting Juliana, he began to slip away. First slowly, then like a rope sliding through my hands too quickly to grip. He had insisted I come to Juliana's birthday party tonight. His exact words. "Dad, don't make it weird. Just come, please." Request had felt less like an invitation and more like an order. And though I had hesitated, the thought of not being there, of giving Juliana one more excuse to tell Andrew I was ungrateful, bitter, old, had been unbearable. So, I bought the bracelet. I would swallow my pride. Again. For him. Always for him. The drive back to my quiet suburban neighborhood took 20 minutes. My modest house sat at the corner of Oakwood and 7th, its once white siding now faded to a tired gray. I parked in the driveway and sat in silence for a long moment. The street was calm. A couple of kids zipped by on bicycles. A dog barked 2 doors down. Nothing unusual, nothing sinister. And yet, that warning wouldn't leave me. Finally, I sighed, grabbed my keys, and stepped out. That's when I noticed it. There was a folded piece of paper tucked under my windshield wiper. My heart skipped. Hands trembling slightly, I pulled it free. The paper was cheap, lined, torn from a notebook. The handwriting was rushed, uneven, as if written in a panic. It read, "If you go tonight, you won't come back alive." I stumbled back a step, the words burning into my eyes. My throat tightened, and for a moment, all I could hear was the pounding of my own blood in my ears. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't some cashier's rambling. Someone knew I was going to that party tonight. Someone wanted me to stay away. But why? I glanced up and down the street, half expecting to see a shadowy figure watching me from behind a tree, or a car parked too long at the curb. But nothing. Just the quiet rustle of leaves in the cool breeze. My instincts told me to call Andrew right then. To warn him. To tell him something wasn't right. But another thought crept in, bitter and cold. Would he even believe me? Juliana had already painted me as paranoid, controlling, stuck in the past. If I called now, with some nonsense about death threats, Andrew would probably just sigh, shake his head, and tell Juliana I was being dramatic. I knew how it would go. I'd hear her voice in the background, sharp and dismissive. "See? I told you your father would try to ruin this night too." I couldn't give her that satisfaction. Not again. Still clutching the note, I walked up to my front porch and sank heavily into the old rocking chair. The wood creaked under my weight. I stared at the bracelet box on the passenger seat of my truck, shining faintly under the street lamp. The words replayed in my mind, "If you go tonight, you won't come back alive." For the first time in a long time, I felt fear, real fear, gnawing at me. Not the fear of loneliness that had lived in me since Marlene's passing. Not the fear of growing old and irrelevant. This was different. This was immediate. And yet, as I sat there, another voice inside me, stubborn and weary, rose up. "Raymond," I muttered under my breath, "you're too damn old to be scared off by anonymous notes and jittery cashiers." I pushed myself up from the chair, my knees aching as they always did, and went inside. I laid the bracelet carefully on the kitchen counter, staring at it as though it might hold answers. Whatever was waiting for me at that party tonight, I had a choice to make: obey the warning and stay home, or go anyway and face whatever storm was brewing. The sight of that back door ajar sent a cold shiver through me, but I didn't rush toward it. At my age, you learn not to act rashly. I just stood in the kitchen, the silence of my house pressing on me. My first thought wasn't about intruders or danger, it was about Marlene. She'd been gone 20 years, but I could almost hear her voice. "Ray, don't ignore the signs. Don't brush things under the rug. Trust your gut." I closed the door gently, locked it tight, and leaned against the counter. My hand brushed the bracelet box. Somehow, that small piece of silver had become more than just a gift. It was the symbol of everything I had sacrificed, everything I was still willing to give. To explain why I couldn't just walk away, why I couldn't take the warning seriously, I have to go back. Back to when life was simpler. Back to when all I lived for was family. I was 22 when I met Marlene at a church picnic. She was pouring sweet tea into paper cups, laughing at some joke, and the sun caught her hair just right. I wasn't much to look at, just a lanky kid who worked long shifts at the steel mill, but she smiled at me like I was somebody. That smile was enough to keep me going for the next 40 years. We married young. We didn't have much. A 2-bedroom rental, hand-me-down furniture, second-hand clothes. But we had each other, and we had dreams. I swore to her I'd take care of her, no matter what it cost me. And I did, at least I tried. When Andrew was born, I was 30. I remember holding him in the delivery room, this tiny, red-faced miracle, and whispering, "I'll never let you down, son." I worked double shifts for years after that, breaking my back so he would never go hungry, never know the kind of worry I grew up with. Marlene stayed home with him, teaching him to read before he even started kindergarten. She was patient, gentle, everything I wasn't. And Andrew adored her. Truth be told, so did I. Life tested us hard when Marlene got sick. Breast cancer. She was only 48. I still remember the doctor's words, clinical and cold, as if he were describing the weather instead of ripping out my heart. I fought for her with everything I had, sold my truck to cover treatments insurance wouldn't touch, begged for overtime at the mill. I learned how to cook plain meals, how to braid our boys' hair for school, how to smile when inside I was crumbling. She fought harder than any woman I've ever known, but after 5 years, her body couldn't fight anymore. She passed on a Tuesday afternoon, the sky outside gray and merciless. That day, Andrew stopped being a boy. He was 18, about to graduate high school, but grief aged him in ways I couldn't fix. And I became both father and mother. I vowed not to remarry, not to bring anyone else into his life. It would just be us, two men holding each other up in a world that didn't care about our loss. I thought that bond would last forever. For a while, it did. Andrew went to college on a scholarship, and I drove 4 hours every other weekend just to bring him groceries, help fix his old car, or sit in his dorm's common room to hear about his classes. He called me his best friend. He told me, "Dad, one day, when I make it, I'll take care of you the way you took care of me." I believed him. But then he met Juliana. She was unlike any girl he'd dated before. Ambitious, sharp-tongued, glamorous in a way that drew stares when she entered a room. Andrew fell for her fast, the way young men do when someone sees them as more than they are. At first, I wanted to like her. I tried. She came from a wealthy family, her father a lawyer, her mother a realtor, and I felt the quiet judgment every time they looked at me, a retired steelworker with calloused hands and a modest pension. But I swallowed my pride. For Andrew. It was little things at first. Juliana corrected the way I spoke. She frowned when I brought homemade casseroles to their apartment. She rolled her eyes when I told old stories at the dinner table. One night, after she thought I'd gone to bed, I overheard her whisper to Andrew, "Your dad's sweet, but he's stuck in another century. Don't you ever want more than that small-town life?" It hit me like a hammer. Andrew defended me at first. But as months turned into years, her voice grew louder in his life, and mine softer. The first big crack came at their wedding. I had saved for years to give him something meaningful. Not money, I didn't have much, but Marlene's necklace. The one she wore every Sunday to church, the one Andrew used to play with as a baby in her arms. I kept it safe for decades, waiting for the day I could pass it down. I offered it to Juliana, expecting at least a smile of gratitude. She looked at it for a moment, then said, "It's nice, but not really my style." She never wore it. Not once. Andrew tried to smooth it over, but I saw the truth in his eyes. He was embarrassed. Embarrassed of me. The years since then have been full of little cuts. Invitations to family vacations that somehow never included me. Holidays where I was seated at the far end of the table. Conversations where my words carried less and less weight. But I stayed. I endured. Because family, once you've lost it, becomes the only thing you can't live without. I told myself that if I kept showing up, if I kept giving, maybe Andrew would remember who I was. Maybe he'd remember what I had sacrificed to give him the life he now lived. That's why the party tonight mattered. Juliana's birthday wasn't just another event. It was another chance. Another moment to prove I wasn't an obstacle, but a father who loved his son enough to bend, break, and bleed for his happiness. That's why I bought the bracelet. That's why I ignored the strange looks, the whispers. But now with that note in my pocket and the image of my back door ajar, I wondered if my devotion had blinded me. I poured myself a glass of water and sat at the kitchen table. My hands trembled slightly, the note lying in front of me like a curse. Someone didn't want me at that party. The cashier. The note. The door. Coincidence? Or was there a truth I hadn't seen? I thought about Andrew. About the boy who used to sit on my shoulders at football games, screaming until his voice gave out. About the young man who once told me, "I'll never forget what you did for me, Dad." If someone wanted to hurt me, fine. But what if this was bigger than me? What if Andrew and the kids were in danger, too? My stomach knotted. Fear mixed with love in equal measure. I had promised Marlene, as she lay in that hospital bed gasping for breath, that I would protect our boy no matter what. And maybe tonight would be the night that promise was tested more than ever before. The sound was faint, just a floorboard creaking in the living room, but it might as well have been thunder in my ears. My heart skipped, then slammed against my ribs with the force of a sledgehammer. I froze in the kitchen, one hand gripping the edge of the counter, my eyes darting toward the doorway. My first thought was denial. Maybe it's just the house settling. Old wood does that. But the rationalizations rang hollow. I had lived in this house for over 40 years. I knew its groans, its size. This was different. This was weight. Someone was in my home. I reached for the nearest thing that could be used as a weapon, a heavy cast-iron skillet from the stovetop. My hands trembled as I held it, but there was steel left in me yet. I wasn't some frail old man who would cower in a corner. I had worked in furnaces, lifted iron bars, raised a child alone. Whoever was in my home, they weren't taking me without a fight. "Who's there?" My voice cracked but carried enough force to fill the silence. No answer. The floorboard creaked again, closer this time. I moved slowly toward the living room, each step deliberate. The house was dim, the late afternoon light fading through the curtains. Shadows stretched long across the walls, swallowing corners. My own reflection in the dark glass of the window startled me before I steadied myself. Then I saw it. A figure stood near the mantel, half hidden in shadow. Tall, thin, wearing dark clothing. He wasn't rummaging through drawers or stealing valuables. He was just standing there, waiting, as if he had been expecting me. "Get out of my house," I growled, raising the skillet. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. The figure didn't move, didn't flinch. Finally, he spoke. His voice was low, rasping, carrying the weight of urgency. "Mr. Larkin, you can't go to that party tonight." My blood ran cold. The same warning. The same exact words. I tightened my grip on the skillet, my knuckles white. "Who the hell are you? How do you know my name?" He stepped slightly into the light, enough for me to see his face. Young, maybe mid-20s. His skin pale, his eyes bloodshot as if he hadn't slept in days. A thin scar ran along his jawline. "You were warned already," he said. "I told you at the store." Recognition hit me like a blow. The cashier. The same eyes. The same fear. "You followed me home?" My anger boiled now, masking the undercurrent of fear. "You broke into my house?" "I had to," he said quickly, raising his hands as if to calm me. "You didn't believe me. You were going to ignore the note. I had to make you understand." "Understand what?" I barked. "That I should let some punk scare me away from my son's house? That I should stay home like a coward? You don't get it." His voice cracked, almost pleading. "If you go to that party, something terrible will happen. To you. To everyone. They'll blame you, Mr. Larkin. They'll destroy you." His words hung heavy in the air. I wanted to dismiss him, to call the cops, to throw him out. But the sincerity in his face, the desperation, God help me, it made me pause. For a moment, silence stretched between us, filled only by the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. My mind spun. How does he know me? Why warn me? Why should I believe you? I demanded. He swallowed hard. Because I've seen it before. With other families. With other parties. They set you up. They make you the villain, and by the time you realize it, it's too late. My head swam. His words made no sense, yet they carried the kind of conviction that came from lived experience. "Who are they?" I pressed. His eyes flicked toward the door, as if expecting someone to burst in at any moment. "I can't say. If I do, they'll know. But listen to me, don't go tonight. No matter how much your son insists. It's not what you think." Rage bubbled inside me. I lowered the skillet but kept my guard up. "You listen to me, son. I've worked my whole damn life for my boy. I buried his mother, I broke my back so he could have a future, and I've taken more disrespect from that wife of his than any man should. And now you're telling me I should stay away on her birthday? You expect me to let her paint me as some bitter, absent old man." He shook his head violently. "You don't understand. The party isn't about her. It's about you." His words hit me like a punch. "What do you mean, about me?" But before he could answer, a car horn honked outside. We both froze. The young man's face went pale. "They're here," he whispered. He darted toward the back door, moving with surprising speed. "Please, Mr. Larkin. Trust me. Stay away tonight. If you want to live, if you want your son to live, don't go." And just like that, he was gone, slipping into the evening like a shadow. I stood there, skillet still in hand, my chest heaving. My house was silent again, but my mind was anything but. I locked every door, every window, my hands shaking. Then I sat heavily on the couch, staring at the note still folded in my pocket. The warnings. The fear. The insistence that the danger was tied to me. And the worst part, a part of me believed him. Not because of his words, but because deep down, I knew Juliana was capable of turning Andrew against me in ways that felt like death itself. She already had, little by little. What if tonight was the final strike? What if the party wasn't just a celebration, but something darker, a chance to erase me entirely? I remembered all the time she smirked at me across the table, her voice honeyed when Andrew was around but sharp as knives when it was just us. "You've had your time, Ray," she once told me when Andrew wasn't listening. "Don't ruin ours by clinging too tight." Maybe the young man wasn't lying. Maybe he was the only one brave, or foolish, enough to warn me. The clock ticked past 6:30. I had less than 30 minutes before the party began. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. Andrew's name lit up the screen. I stared at it, my hand hovering. Answering would mean pretending everything was fine, pretending I wasn't shaken to my core. But not answering would only give Juliana more ammunition. With a deep breath, I picked it up. "Hey, Dad," Andrew said cheerfully, though his tone carried a hint of strain. "You're on your way, right?" I hesitated. My mouth went dry. "Yeah, son. I'll be there." "Good," he said quickly. "Juliana will be glad you came. Don't be late." And then he hung up. Not "I'll be glad you came." Not "I want you here." Juliana would be glad. Always Juliana. I sat in silence, the phone heavy in my hand. My reflection caught in the darkened TV screen across from me. A tired old man with lines etched deep into his face, eyes hollow from years of giving and rarely receiving. For a moment, I thought about staying home, locking the doors, turning on the game, and letting the night pass in quiet solitude. But then I thought of Andrew, of the boy who once looked at me like a hero, of the promise I made to Marlene. I couldn't abandon him. Not now. Not ever. Even if it killed me. The neighborhood glowed with strings of golden lights as I pulled my truck up to Andrew and Juliana's house. From the outside, it looked like the picture of warmth and festivity. Cars lined the street, music drifted faintly into the cool September air, and laughter spilled from the open windows. But inside me, there was no warmth. Only the echo of those warnings, the folded notes, and the image of the cashier's pale face whispering, "Don't go." I killed the engine, sat for a moment, and stared at the house. My fingers brushed the bracelet box in my jacket pocket, the silver cool even through the fabric. I had come this far, and turning back now would mean letting Juliana win without even stepping inside. I muttered under my breath, "All right, Ray. Smile. Stay steady. Don't give her the satisfaction." Then I stepped out of the truck. Inside, the house was buzzing with people. The smell of catered food wafted from the kitchen, salmon, some kind of roasted vegetables, things I couldn't pronounce. A crowd of well-dressed friends milled about, champagne flutes clinking, polished laughter bouncing off the walls. I recognized maybe 2 faces. The rest were Juliana's people, her colleagues, her social circle, the kind who always eyed me like I was a museum exhibit from a world they didn't care to understand. Andrew spotted me first. He pushed through the crowd, a broad smile on his face, and for a moment my chest eased. He looked like the boy I remembered, tall, kind-eyed, still with that same crooked smile Marlene had adored. "Dad, you made it." He hugged me, tight and quick, then pulled back. His eyes darted to the side nervously, toward Juliana, who stood near the dining table, a glass of wine in hand. She wore a red dress that shimmered under the lights, her dark hair pinned up perfectly. She was radiant, commanding attention without trying. And she was watching me, her lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Raymond," she said smoothly, her voice carrying across the room. "So glad you could join us." There was no warmth in it, just control. I walked toward her, forced a smile, and handed her the box. "Happy birthday, Juliana. Thought you might like this." She took it delicately, as though it might be contaminated. Opening the velvet lid, her eyes flicked over the bracelet, then back up at me. "Oh, how thoughtful." The pause after the word thoughtful was a dagger. Around us, a few guests chuckled politely, sensing the tension but not daring to comment. Andrew leaned in quickly. "It's beautiful, Dad. Really. Juliana loves jewelry." She slipped the bracelet back into the box and set it down on the table beside her wineglass. Not on her wrist. Not even a pretense. Just discarded like an unwanted trinket. My jaw clenched, but I forced the smile to stay. I wouldn't let her see me crack. The night moved on. People drank, laughed, and shared stories. I lingered on the edges, nursing a glass of water. Every now and then, Andrew tried to include me in conversations, but Juliana was quick to steer them elsewhere. "Raymond's retired now," she said at one point, her tone light but sharp. "He spends most of his time at home. Isn't that right?" I swallowed my pride and nodded. "That's right." Her friends laughed, one of them saying, "Must be nice to have no responsibilities." I wanted to snap back, wanted to tell them about the nights I worked through until dawn so Andrew could have shoes for school, about the mortgage payments I wrestled with, about Marlene's hospital bills. But I held my tongue. Because the more I spoke, the more Juliana would twist my words. Halfway through the evening, Andrew pulled me aside into the kitchen. His voice was hushed, his face tight. "Dad, please. Try to be nice. She's stressed tonight. A lot of people from her work are here." "Andrew," I said quietly, "I am being nice. I'm trying. But he cut me off. Don't, Dad. Please. Don't start. I looked at him, at the lines forming around his eyes, at the tension in his shoulders. He wasn't a boy anymore. He was a man, tired, worn, stretched thin between the woman he loved and the father who raised him. And in that moment, I realized the cruel truth. No matter what I did, no matter how hard I tried, Juliana would always have the upper hand. Because she had his heart in ways I no longer did. But still, I couldn't shake the warnings. The notes. The intruder in my house. Andrew, I said softly, gripping his arm. Has anyone been acting strange lately? Around you or Juliana? He frowned. What do you mean? I mean, has anyone warned you? About tonight? He blinked. No. Why? I hesitated. If I told him everything, he'd laugh. Or worse, he'd tell Juliana. So I shook my head. Never mind. Just be careful, son. He gave me a puzzled look but didn't press. As the evening stretched, I kept my eyes open. And slowly, I began to notice things. Near the back door, two men stood watchful, not mingling, not laughing, just observing. Their suits were too crisp, their expressions too serious. I didn't recognize them. Near the hallway, a young woman whispered something into her phone before disappearing upstairs. And Juliana herself, she kept glancing at me, her smile too practiced, her eyes too sharp. It felt less like a birthday party and more like a performance. Like I was the only one in the room who hadn't been given the script. At one point, the music dimmed, and Juliana tapped her glass with a spoon. The chatter died instantly. She stood in the center of the room, radiant under the chandelier, and smiled. "Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight," she began. Her voice carried with ease, every word rehearsed. "I feel so blessed to be surrounded by such amazing friends and family." She glanced at Andrew, who beamed at her. Then her gaze slid to me. "And of course," she continued, "I'm grateful my father-in-law could make it. It means the world to have him here tonight." Polite applause rippled through the room. I forced a nod, though inside I felt the chill of her words. Not gratitude. Possession. A public declaration that I was under her roof, playing by her rules. Dinner followed. I sat at the long table, squeezed between strangers who talked about hedge funds and European vacations. The food was exquisite, plated like artwork. I barely tasted it. My eyes kept flicking toward those two suited men by the door, who never sat down, never ate, never smiled. Juliana raised a toast halfway through the meal. "To new beginnings," she said, her glass held high. "And to letting go of the past." The words hit me square in the chest. A few guests clinked glasses, smiling, unaware of the knife hidden in her phrasing. Andrew drank without hesitation. I lowered my glass, my hand trembling slightly. Later, when people began drifting back into the living room, Juliana approached me alone. Her smile was thin, her voice low so no one else could hear. "You should enjoy tonight, Raymond," she said. "After all, we don't know how many more of these you'll get." My breath caught. It wasn't just cruelty. It was a threat. I stared at her, searching her face for some sign of jest. There was none. Before I could respond, she turned and glided back to her guests, laughter bubbling from her lips as if she hadn't just gutted me with words. I sat in silence, my heart pounding. The cashier's warning. The notes. The intruder. Juliana's thinly veiled threat. This wasn't paranoia. This was real. Something was coming. Something dark. And I was standing right in the middle of it. As I rose to leave the dining room, I passed by the bracelet box on the table where Juliana had left it. Only now, it was gone. And in its place was a folded slip of paper, identical to the ones left on my truck. I unfolded it under the tablecloth, my blood running cold as I read the words. "They'll make it look like you did it." I held the folded slip of paper in my hands like it might burn me if I let it go. "They'll make it look like you did it." The words repeated in my mind, each syllable striking sharper than the last. I scanned the room, trying to make sense of the ordinary party around me. People laughed, sipped wine, took selfies, and danced. Nothing looked out of place. But I knew better. This wasn't a party. It was a stage. And I was the actor whose part had already been written. I slipped quietly toward the kitchen, clutching the paper, and glanced at the side door. Locked. The suited men from earlier were nowhere to be seen. It was too quiet. A faint sound made me freeze, a soft whisper from the hallway. I moved cautiously, keeping to the shadows, until I saw Juliana kneeling near the base of the stairs. She was speaking to someone, her voice low and urgent. I couldn't make out the words. My chest tightened. Whoever she was talking to was clearly helping her orchestrate something. I had no idea what, but my instincts screamed that it was dangerous. I remembered the warnings, the cashier's words, the notes. At first, I had dismissed them as the frantic imaginings of a frightened young man. But now, in the dim light of the kitchen, I realized I had underestimated the danger. I had spent my entire life protecting my son, Andrew. From bullies, from mistakes, from my own failures. And now I was facing something I couldn't fight with my fists or my hands-on experience. I pulled my phone from my pocket and considered calling Andrew. But I stopped. Juliana was everywhere. Even a quick call could alert her that I was suspicious. And she had friends, people who could monitor every move, twist every word. I had to be careful, smart, quiet. I moved to the pantry and opened a small cupboard to hide for a moment. The soft click of the door behind me made me flinch. Someone was coming. I peeked around the corner and saw a young man, one of the servers, moving with calculated precision. He carried a tray of hors d'oeuvres but kept glancing toward the dining room as if waiting for a signal. I crouched lower. Something about his movements felt rehearsed, not spontaneous. The party continued, oblivious to the tension simmering in the kitchen. Guests laughed at stories I didn't hear, clinked glasses in unison, and danced to music that suddenly felt like a soundtrack to a thriller. I thought about Andrew again. He was sitting across the room, forced to smile, laughter pressed into his face like a mask. He didn't notice me, didn't see the fear etched into my own features. He probably thought I was just being dramatic, that I was overreacting as I always had when life got complicated. But I wasn't overreacting. I couldn't be. I edged closer to the stairs, keeping the wall between me and the rest of the house. Juliana had disappeared from view, but I could hear faint whispers and footsteps. My heart pounded in my chest. Every instinct screamed at me to retreat, to get Andrew and leave. But I couldn't just run, not without understanding what was happening. And then I saw it. A set of envelopes, neatly arranged on a small side table near the hallway. I recognized Andrew's handwriting on one of them. My hands shook as I picked it up. Inside were several photos, Andrew and Juliana, smiling at me during past holidays, during birthdays, during moments that seemed ordinary at the time. But each photo was marked, circled with red ink. Dates were scribbled in the corners. Notes. Instructions. I didn't understand all of it at first, but the pattern was clear. Juliana was planning. And not for anything innocent. A sudden sound behind me made me spin. The suited men from earlier had returned, standing silently at the top of the stairs. They didn't speak, just watched, calculating. One of them spoke finally, his voice low. "Sir, you shouldn't be here alone." I swallowed, gripping the envelopes like a lifeline. "I'm not leaving," I said. "Not until I figure out what she's planning." The man shook his head. "It's dangerous. She's meticulous. You're in over your head." I clenched my fists. I've been in over my head before. I fought fires, saved lives, raised a son alone. I'm not afraid of her schemes. From the living room came a sharp laugh. Juliana. I froze. She was brilliant at controlling every situation, every narrative. Everyone else in the house would think nothing was wrong. Only I could see the cracks. Only I could see the danger. And then I understood. This was a trap. Not just to humiliate me or turn Andrew against me. It was bigger. It was a setup that could destroy me entirely. I moved carefully, slipping through the shadows to a small alcove near the staircase. From there, I had a partial view of the living room. Juliana stood at the center, glass raised, surrounded by her friends. Andrew was nearby, laughing politely, unaware that he was part of the stage. Her eyes met mine for a brief second. The smile she gave was perfect, polite. But the malice behind it was unmistakable. I realized then what the notes had meant. "They'll make it look like you did it." Whoever was orchestrating this, her allies, the suited men, maybe even the guests unknowingly participating, they were setting me up. Something catastrophic was planned for tonight. And if I intervened blindly, it would be blamed on me. I slid down the wall, crouching, trying to remain unseen. My mind raced. I had always been someone who solved problems with hard work, patience, and hands-on effort. But this was different. I needed a plan. A way to expose the truth without tipping off Juliana. A memory flashed. Marlene, years ago, on her deathbed, holding my hand. "You are stronger than you know," she whispered. Asterisk, "Never let them see you afraid." Asterisk. I drew strength from that memory. I had faced grief, betrayal, and loss before. I could face this too. And I would. I began to observe. The suited men moved with precision, almost imperceptibly. Guests lingered near certain corners, subtly herding people in directions I couldn't yet understand. The photos in the envelopes revealed the pattern. Sequences, timing, placements. It was a blueprint. Juliana, the orchestrator. Andrew, unknowingly complicit. The house, transformed into a machine where I was the target. I felt a spark of anger, sharp and invigorating. I had lived my life protecting others, bending, sacrificing, giving. I wasn't about to be eliminated like a pawn in her game. I formulated a plan, in small steps, careful and deliberate. I would not be the victim. I would gather evidence. I would expose the truth. And I would protect my son, whether he realized it or not. I glanced at the envelopes again. They contained not just photos, but instructions, guest placements, timing cues. This wasn't just a game. This was a scheme designed to isolate me, discredit me, possibly even endanger me physically. My pulse quickened. The fear that had gripped me earlier transformed into determination. I could do this. I had faced death before, not in literal terms, but in every lonely night raising a boy alone, in every hospital visit with Marlene, in every moment when my sacrifices went unnoticed. I could face this too. I slipped one of the envelopes into my pocket, careful to avoid detection, and returned to the edge of the living room. Juliana's smile was still fixed, still practiced, still deadly. But now, I had information. Now, I had a plan. It wouldn't be easy. It wouldn't be simple. But I would uncover the truth tonight. I would protect Andrew. And I would not allow Juliana to win. Because I had survived far worse than a scheming daughter-in-law. And I had lived my life on one principle: family first. Always. The music dimmed for a toast. Juliana raised her glass, her voice carrying over the room. "To surprises," she said, her smile perfect, her eyes glinting with something sharp and dangerous. I froze. Somewhere behind the music, I could hear the faint click of a mechanism. And I realized, with horror, that the night's real surprise was about to begin, and it involved me. The toast ended, glasses clinked, and laughter resumed, but I barely noticed. My attention was fixed on the faint click I had heard just moments before. Mechanisms hidden somewhere, moving in ways the guests would never see. I edged closer to the kitchen hallway, eyes scanning, ears straining. My pulse was hammering. Every step I took was careful, deliberate, calculated. If Juliana had planned this well, and I was beginning to realize she had, then one wrong move could trigger everything. And I couldn't afford a wrong move. I slipped behind the kitchen counter, crouching as though I were invisible. My fingers brushed the envelopes I had stashed earlier. They were my roadmap. Each one outlined who was supposed to be where, and when. Most of the guests had no idea they were playing a part in her plan. They were unwitting pawns, performing simple tasks, laughing, drinking, oblivious to the danger lurking in the background. But she knew every detail, every timing, every distraction. And I realized the terrifying truth. I wasn't just the target. I was the centerpiece. A noise drew my attention, the clatter of a tray, the muffled shout of a guest startled. I slipped around the corner and caught a glimpse of the suited men, coordinating quietly with a few others. They were subtle, discreet. No one in the room would have noticed if they weren't looking for it. One of the men signaled toward the dining room. I followed their gaze. That's when I saw it. A centerpiece on the main table, a large, ornate cake. It looked harmless, festive even. But my instincts screamed that it wasn't just a cake. Something about the way the men positioned it, the way Juliana lingered nearby, smiling at her guests with flawless control, it screamed danger. I swallowed hard. The notes. The warnings. The intruder in my house. It all made sense now. This was the climax. Everything had been leading to this moment. I needed to act, but I had to be smart. I couldn't confront Juliana openly, not yet. If I did, she could manipulate the room, turn Andrew, turn the guests, turn everyone against me. So I stayed in the shadows, watching, waiting for the right moment. Meanwhile, Andrew drifted near me, blissfully unaware. He laughed at a joke someone told, his hand brushing mine for a moment. I wanted to warn him, but I couldn't risk it. He wouldn't understand. He might even think I was overreacting, like I always did. Juliana, standing across the room, caught my eye again. That smile, so perfect, so controlled, was like ice against my skin. She had planned this entire evening meticulously. Every glance, every toast, every arrangement of people. And somehow, she had made it look like a celebration. But beneath the veneer of joy lay a trap. The music shifted, signaling a transition in the party. Guests moved closer to the living room for dancing. That was my opportunity. I edged closer to the cake, staying low, eyes scanning. The suited men were still near the doorway, observing. I needed to disrupt their plan without drawing attention. I remembered a trick from my younger days, a habit from the steel mill when machinery malfunctioned. Slow, deliberate, calculated movements. I moved the tray slightly, enough to block the mechanism I suspected had been rigged. If Juliana had intended the cake as a trap, this small interference might buy me seconds. Then I noticed the subtle movements of other guests, friends of Juliana's, carefully arranged to funnel me toward the center of the room. A smile here, a guiding hand there. They thought they were being polite, but in reality, they were instruments in her orchestration. My heart sank. She had turned everyone into unwitting accomplices. And Andrew, sitting so close to the action, was completely exposed. I couldn't let this happen. Not tonight. Not to my son. I needed a distraction. Something subtle, something that wouldn't alert Juliana. My eyes landed on a tall lamp near the corner. Its cord was frayed, slightly loose. If I tugged it, it could topple without causing serious harm, but enough to draw attention and break the flow of her plan. I waited for the moment when Juliana's back was turned, the suited men distracted. Then I made my move, tugging the cord just enough to tip the lamp. It crashed to the floor with a loud clatter. Guests jumped, glasses rattled, and for a few seconds, chaos erupted. Juliana spun, her eyes narrowing, and I seized the moment. I slipped to the side of the room, edging toward Andrew. "Dad," he whispered, sensing something off. I smiled quickly, trying to mask the urgency in my chest. "It's all right, son. Stay calm." But even as I spoke, I could see Juliana regaining control, her eyes scanning the room, calculating. She was relentless, unstoppable in her precision. I needed a way to expose her plan, to reveal what she was doing without letting her manipulate the narrative. I scanned the envelopes in my pocket. Each one contained proof, photos, notes, instructions. If I could get someone to see them, anyone, maybe I could turn the tide. But who? The guests were loyal to her, or naive. Andrew, well, Andrew would never believe me without concrete evidence. I considered the suited men. One of them had been watching me since I arrived. Maybe he wasn't completely under Juliana's control. I had to take a risk. I edged closer to the man at the doorway, keeping my movements slow. "Sir," I whispered, low, careful. "I know what's happening tonight. I have proof. You need to help me." He hesitated, his eyes flicking to the cake, to the party, to Juliana. Then he nodded subtly. I felt a flicker of hope. Together, we could intervene, disrupt whatever she had planned, and protect Andrew. But Juliana was always watching. From across the room, she glanced at me, her smile calm, her eyes sharp. She knew something had shifted. I could feel it, a chill creeping up my spine. She was analyzing every motion, anticipating my next move. And that was when I saw it, the small mechanism hidden under the cake table, just as I had suspected. A tiny latch, wired to something that could topple over or release something hazardous. I didn't know exactly what, but instinct told me it wasn't just decoration. I crouched lower, trying to stay unseen. The suited man behind me gave a slight nod, signaling that he understood. I whispered, "I need a distraction. Any ideas?" He shook his head. "Just create chaos. Don't let them anticipate you." I looked around, mind racing. The guests were distracted, laughing, dancing. Juliana had returned to her center-of-the-room performance, raising her glass in a smile that was all teeth and danger. I needed to act fast. Every second that passed increased the risk for Andrew, for me. Then an idea struck. The punch bowl. A heavy glass vessel, filled with red liquid. If I tipped it carefully, it would spill across the floor, sending guests scurrying, breaking the flow, creating confusion. Enough to disable her timing. I moved, careful, precise, until I was close enough. A slight nudge, and the punch bowl wobbled. The liquid sloshed, spilling over the tablecloth, dribbling toward the floor. Guests shrieked, stepped back, some slipping slightly. Chaos erupted. Juliana's eyes narrowed, but her mouth stayed in that practiced smile. She hadn't expected me to disrupt her plan so early. I seized the moment, moving directly to Andrew. "We need to go," I said quietly. His eyes widened, confused. "What? Dad, what's happening?" "No time to explain. Trust me." As we moved toward the door, I could feel the tension thickening. Juliana had regained her composure, but something was different now. She knew I had interfered. And interference, no matter how small, wasn't something she tolerated. I pushed open the back door and stepped into the cool night air. Andrew followed, bewildered but obedient. The suited man slipped out just behind us, disappearing into the shadows to keep watch. We were outside, but I knew the danger wasn't over. Juliana's plan was still in motion, and she had resources, allies, and the cunning to adapt faster than anyone I had ever faced. And yet, for the first time that night, I felt a surge of control. I wasn't completely helpless. I had evidence, allies, and instincts honed by decades of struggle and survival. I had survived the death of my wife, the loss of my youth, the betrayal of my own son's trust. I could survive this too. And I would. As I glanced back at the house, I saw Juliana standing at the window, her smile wider than ever, but her eyes glinting with something darker than I had ever seen before. She whispered, though I couldn't hear the words exactly, and I knew one thing with absolute certainty: this battle wasn't over. It had only just begun. Outside, the cool September night wrapped around me like a cloak. The chaos inside still echoed faintly through the walls, shouts, laughter, music, but here, in the shadow of the back porch, I could finally think. Andrew stood beside me, pale and confused. "Dad, what was that?" he asked. I placed a hand on his shoulder, steadying him. "It's complicated, son. But you've got to trust me. Everything inside, it's not what it seems." His brow furrowed. "Not what it seems." I nodded. "Not tonight. Not her. She's playing a game, Andrew. And right now, we're in the middle of it." Andrew swallowed hard, his eyes wide. "I don't understand." I wanted to explain everything, how she had turned the party into a trap, how she manipulated everyone, even me, how every detail tonight had been orchestrated, but I realized some truths were too heavy, too dangerous, to say aloud yet. Instead, I said, "You'll understand soon. Just stay close." I took a deep breath, the night air sharp and invigorating. I had survived decades of challenges, losses, betrayals, the quiet heartbreak of watching my son grow up with a stepmother who resented me. But nothing had prepared me for this level of calculation, this level of cruelty. And yet, I had an advantage. I knew her. Every smile she wore, every word she chose, every glance she gave, it all told me who she was. I knew her game. And now, I could plan my next move. Inside the house, the suited man was moving discreetly, keeping watch on the guests and mechanisms. He had understood that my interference at the punch bowl wasn't a mistake. He had seen what I could do. For a moment, I allowed myself to imagine an ally where I had previously seen only enemies. "Raymond," he whispered, stepping through the shadows. "You have to be careful. She has eyes everywhere. And she's dangerous." "I know," I said softly. "But I've been dangerous too. More than she realizes." He gave me a small nod, then melted back into the darkness. I could feel the tension inside the house, like a coiled spring. The clock was ticking. Every moment, Juliana's plan edged closer to execution. And we didn't have much time. I turned to Andrew. "We're going back in. We have to." His eyes widened in disbelief. "Back in? Dad, we just—" "No questions, son. Just trust me." We slipped through the shadows to a side entrance, keeping low and out of sight. The party, which had moments ago seemed chaotic, had settled again. Juliana had regained control, her movements smooth, her smile perfect. But now, I could see cracks in her composure. She was calculating, anticipating, but she didn't know that I had learned some of her secrets. I had the envelopes in my jacket pocket. Evidence. Instructions. Proof. All the pieces I needed to expose her without giving her the chance to manipulate anyone else. I found a quiet corner near the staircase, away from prying eyes. I pulled out the envelopes, sorting quickly. Photos, notes, sequences. She had meticulously recorded who would be where and when, down to the second. Every guest, every movement, even minor distractions. She had orchestrated it all to make me look like the villain, the cause of a disaster that would unfold tonight. I realized then that this wasn't just about control. This was about legacy. She wanted to erase me, to rewrite the story of my life, my sacrifice, and my relationship with Andrew. And she was damn near successful. I looked at Andrew. "Son, you've got to watch and listen. Don't speak unless I tell you." He nodded, swallowing hard, the fear in his eyes mingled with trust. I formulated a plan. Small, precise. One move at a time. Disrupt the mechanisms. Expose her manipulations. Protect Andrew. And wait for the right moment to confront her. It would require patience, calculated risk, and nerves of steel. I moved first to the cake table. I had already disrupted it once with the lamp and the punch bowl, but now I needed to ensure that whatever trap she had planned wouldn't activate again. Kneeling, I examined the base. The latch. The wiring. Subtle, clever, deadly if triggered. I pulled a few wires, carefully disconnecting them, testing the mechanism to ensure it wouldn't work. My hands shook slightly, but I stayed steady. Decades of manual labor and problem-solving had prepared me for this, though never in a social setting like this. The suited man appeared briefly, giving me a subtle nod. His presence reassured me that I wasn't entirely alone in this fight. Meanwhile, Juliana floated through the room, greeting guests, her laughter light, but her eyes scanning. She was searching, always searching, for the smallest hint of resistance. But now, she didn't know I had anticipated her moves. Andrew stayed close, watching silently. I could feel his anxiety, his confusion. But I also felt his trust. That was all I needed. I had to use it wisely. And then I noticed something else. Another envelope had been left on the mantel, one I hadn't seen before. Curious, I slipped it into my pocket. The handwriting was unfamiliar, more precise. Someone was working with her, coordinating the plan. Whoever it was, they underestimated me. I had to think several steps ahead. She had already planned contingencies for chaos, backup plans for my interference, distractions, diversions. But she hadn't anticipated the combination of the envelopes, the suited man's support, and my willingness to fight intelligently rather than blindly. I moved through the shadows, carefully observing every guest. Every movement, every reaction, every laugh and glance, everything became data. Patterns emerged. Timing cues. The next steps in her trap. And then I saw it, the faint glimmer of a mechanism under one of the side tables near the stairs. A secondary trap, possibly meant to isolate me if I approached the cake again. I made a decision. I would dismantle it, not just for tonight, but as a demonstration. I needed her to see that her games would not succeed. I crouched near the table, moving quickly but quietly. My fingers found the small lever, the hidden trigger. I pressed it, releasing the tension safely. The mechanism clicked harmlessly into place. Juliana, watching from across the room, stiffened. Her smile faltered, just for a second. I caught it. That slight crack in her perfect facade. I allowed myself a small, silent smile. One step closer to victory. But then I heard it, a faint whisper behind me. "Careful, Mr. Larkin." I spun, heart hammering, to see the suited man standing just behind me. His eyes were serious, unwavering. "She's expecting you to make a mistake. Don't." I nodded. "I won't. Not tonight." Together, we scanned the room. Juliana was gathering the guests near the main area again, orchestrating another segment of her plan. But now, I had information she didn't anticipate. I knew the sequences, the triggers, the instructions she had left in the envelopes. I had the upper hand in knowledge, even if she still had control over the stage. The tension in the room grew, palpable even to the guests who had no idea of the true stakes. Laughter rang hollow now. Music felt like a soundtrack to an unfolding thriller. Every eye on me, even those unaware, was part of the performance. I moved closer to Andrew, whispering, "Stay with me. Watch me. Trust me." He nodded, gripping my arm. Fear, confusion, and trust mingled in his gaze. I had one final step to take. I needed to expose Juliana completely, but carefully. If I rushed, if I acted openly, she could manipulate perception. I needed proof, witnesses, undeniable evidence. And I had it, the envelopes. I slipped one of the envelopes onto the coffee table in the center of the room, just visible enough for the guests to notice. The photos, the notes, the instructions, every detail laid bare. I whispered for Andrew to stay back, and then stepped into view, drawing the attention of Juliana and the room. "Everyone," I said, my voice steady, calm but firm. "Look at this." The room froze. Glasses paused mid-air. Eyes turned toward me. And Juliana's smile faltered, her eyes widening just slightly. I felt the surge of power. For the first time tonight, I wasn't reacting. I was acting. And the stage was mine. Juliana's perfect composure cracked. Her lips twitched, her hands trembled just slightly. The guests stared, confused, as I began revealing her manipulations step by step. And then she whispered, low and venomous, almost to herself. "You think this changes anything, Raymond? You have no idea what I'm capable of." The room was silent. Guests hovered near the edges of the space, glasses still in hand, uncertain, their eyes darting between me and Juliana. I held the envelopes carefully on the coffee table, each one a testament to the web she had spun. Every photograph, every note, every plan meticulously laid bare. Juliana's lips twitched in a smile that no longer reached her eyes. Her shoulders stiffened. The guests were confused, some whispering, others staring at me as if I had gone mad. But I knew better. I had the truth. I took a slow step forward. "This isn't a game," I said. My voice carried over the room, steady, commanding. "This is manipulation. This is deceit. And it's been happening right under your noses." Some of the guests shifted uncomfortably. Juliana's control was slipping. The mask she wore so carefully had begun to fracture. I motioned to the envelopes. "These are her instructions, who should move where, when to create distractions, what everyone should do to isolate me tonight. Every detail, carefully recorded." A few guests leaned closer, their curiosity piqued. One of her colleagues frowned. "Wait, this can't be real, can it?" I opened an envelope, showing photographs of Andrew and me at past family events. Red ink circled small actions, small gestures, with notes like, "He should feel awkward here," and asterisk, "Isolate him before the toast." Asterisk. One of the older guests gasped. "My God, she planned this." Juliana's smile faltered. She took a step forward, trying to regain composure. "Raymond, what are you talking about?" I didn't flinch. I met her gaze. "I'm talking about the truth. Your manipulations, your orchestrations, the way you've controlled everyone around you, and the way you've tried to isolate me from my own son." Andrew stepped closer, still hesitant. "Mom." Her eyes flicked to him, sharp and calculating. "Andrew, But I interrupted. "Don't, Andrew. Just listen." I turned back to the room. "You all thought this was a birthday party, a celebration. But she's been using each of you as instruments in her plan, designed to make me look bad, make my son doubt me, maybe even ruin me entirely." A murmur spread through the guests. Confused faces, shocked expressions, some nodding, realizing the weight of my words. Juliana's composure cracked further. Her voice lowered, venomous. "You have no idea what you're saying, Raymond. You're imagining things." I stepped closer, confident now, empowered by truth. "I'm showing you, not imagining. The instructions, the photos, the plans, everything. All of it." I opened a final envelope, revealing a sequence meant to culminate in an embarrassing, isolating, possibly dangerous scenario, right in the middle of the party. Gasps filled the room. Juliana's eyes darted frantically. Her hands trembled, her perfect mask slipping completely. "You planned to humiliate me. To make me look foolish. Tonight, in front of my son. In front of everyone you could manipulate," I said, voice steady, powerful. "And it's over." Juliana's lips pressed into a thin line. She looked around, desperate, trying to gauge who in the room still supported her. But for the first time, I saw doubt, uncertainty in their eyes. Her aura of control had crumbled. Andrew moved closer to me, his hand brushing mine. His eyes searched mine, filled with a mix of fear, love, and realization. "Dad." I didn't know. I placed a hand on his shoulder. "I know, son. That's why I had to act carefully. It's not your fault. You've never understood her manipulations until now." Juliana's voice cut through the silence, low and dangerous. "You think you've won? This isn't over, Raymond." I shook my head. "No, Juliana. You're wrong. It is over. Tonight, the truth is out, and no one can undo it. You won't manipulate my son, my family, or me again. Your reign of control ends here." Her eyes flicked toward the suited man who had aided me subtly throughout the evening. He stood firm, neutral, a silent enforcer of truth. Juliana's gaze hardened. She realized she had miscalculated, underestimated me, and now her power over the evening had vanished. The guests began murmuring among themselves. Her colleagues, her friends. Confusion and shock replaced the admiration she had carefully curated. Some approached me quietly, nodding, acknowledging the evidence I had revealed. The veil of her charm was lifted. Juliana's face was pale now, the mask of control broken entirely. Her hands trembled, and for the first time, I saw fear. I looked at Andrew. "Son, tonight you see the truth. And it's time to make your own choices." Andrew swallowed, eyes fixed on his mother. Then he looked at me. I understand now. Dad, thank you for protecting me." I pulled him close, whispering, "Always. That's what I do." Juliana tried one last attempt, a desperate, calculated plea. "Andrew, don't believe him. He's twisting things. He's trying to ruin us." Andrew shook his head slowly, his gaze steady for the first time in years. No, Mom. I see it. I finally see it. The weight of those words hit her. She realized that her control over my son was gone. Completely gone. Her shoulders slumped slightly. Pride, control, and power stripped away in a single, undeniable moment. I turned to the guests, my voice firm but calm. The lesson here isn't just about deceit or manipulation. It's about integrity, honesty, and protecting the people you love. Tonight, the truth won. And that's enough. Some of the guests nodded quietly, understanding. Others were still processing. But the room had shifted irreversibly. Juliana's performance was over. The game was revealed. I felt a quiet satisfaction, not of vengeance, but of justice, of protection, of surviving a test I hadn't expected but had faced successfully. Juliana's final words were a whisper, barely audible over the soft hum of conversations resuming. You think you've won, but you don't know the end. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The end wasn't hers to dictate anymore. She had lost control, the truth had been revealed, and the consequences of her actions would ripple through her life in ways she couldn't manipulate. I walked over to Andrew, placing a hand on his shoulder. Son, tonight you learned something important. People will try to manipulate, control, and deceive. But love, integrity, and patience, those are stronger than schemes. Andrew nodded, a small, grateful smile forming. I see it now. Thank you, Dad. We stepped outside into the cool night air, leaving the house behind. The tension of the evening began to ease, replaced by quiet relief. We had survived the storm, and more importantly, we had endured it together. I looked at my son and smiled, the weight of decades of sacrifice, struggle, and love lifting slightly from my shoulders. Let's go home, son. We've earned it. As we walked toward my truck, I glanced back one last time. Juliana stood at the window, her figure framed by the dim glow of the party lights. She was silent now, her perfect smile gone. Fear, frustration, and disbelief mingled in her expression. And I realized something profound. She could never take control again. Not over my son. Not over me. Not over the life I had built, the love I had nurtured, or the sacrifices I had made. I had survived. I had protected my son. I had uncovered the truth. And in that moment, I knew, quietly, powerfully, that life could still hold victories, even after decades of struggle. The air was cool against my face as I started the truck. Andrew climbed in beside me, still quiet, still processing. I glanced in the rearview mirror at the house, at Juliana's figure framed in the window. She would have to live with what had been revealed tonight, just as I had had to live with every challenge in my life. But now, the scales had shifted. I smiled softly to myself. The night was ours. And this time, I wasn't just surviving, I was winning. Weeks later, the house was empty of guests. Juliana had retreated into her own world, her plans exposed and dismantled. Andrew and I rebuilt the bond that had been strained for years, filled with honesty, trust, and patience. I realized that life doesn't always give you dramatic victories. Sometimes, the most powerful triumphs are quiet, unnoticed by the world, but deeply felt by the heart. And tonight, for the first time in a long time, I felt the weight of decades lift. I had endured. I had loved. I had protected. And that, I knew, was enough. I glanced at Andrew, and we smiled together. The past was behind us. The future, unwritten, was ours to shape. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story.